Hey everyone, welcome to Singularity Computers Client Build 18 Part 4. As you can see, I'm test fitting the custom reservoir mounting plate with the Singularity Computers core reservoir mounts and the pump and reservoir configurations. We're going to come back to this. I'm now going to go back and solve a problem that we first came across in Part 2 of the build log. There are 20 hard drives going into this build, and for this I'm using 4 hot swap hard drive bays. I'm also using 420mm radiators in the rear compartment of the case so that these hot swap bays can actually fit. But I knew this could be a problem. I knew that they may not fit, and it turns out the 2 on the inside fit just fine, but the ones on the outside that line up with the radiators are 10mm too big. So whenever I come across a problem like this, I go to the customer with a number of different solutions. And in this case, the customer chose the best solution, which I'm obviously very happy about, which is to modify the hot swap hard drive bays. Now, the standard thickness for fans is 25mm. So the stock fans on these hot swap bays were 80mm, 25mm thick. We can easily drop this down to 15mm. So I have some noise blocker 15mm thick fans. They're slim fans, and I'm going to be installing those. But as you can see, the manufacturer didn't really want you to modify these hot swap bays and install different fans because, I mean, you can see the threads were protruding. I had to cut off a whole section on the back just so that I can install different fans, and now I'm tapping some threads. So I'm using M4 threads for this, but really not that difficult, probably 15 minutes per hot swap bay, and they pretty much look factory. There was another small mod that I had to do to the fan cables. They have a proprietary weird connector, so I just took them off the stock fans and put them onto the new fans. So this mod is complete, and the hot swap hard drive bays should now fit. Now you can see, because we're using 420mm radiators, it means that there's a spot on the bottom panel that is not covered, it's not filled in, it was completely open. So I've installed an aluminium panel which I've painted to match the case. I've even managed to match the finish. The paint that I've used is just a matte or flat black, and I've bolted it into position, and you know, it looks factory. It looks like it was meant to be there, and it works perfectly. So just above that is obviously where the hot swap bays are going, and now finally I can see if they are actually going to fit. So you can see there's very little room for them, and I think it's going to be very close. If anything, I may have to slide the radiators forward just a little bit, because I mean, it's going to be so close that I need probably 1mm more to actually get them to fit. But you can see I've completed the custom cables and all of the cable management that is going to end up behind the hot swap bays, and there was quite a lot of that to do for the Aquero 6 XT. So these are the fans that we are going to be using. Noise blocker, Black Silent Pros, some of my favorite fans, and this is a nice little upgrade for these hot swap bays. I mean, these fans are far higher quality than the stock fans. They're going to be a lot quieter. Even though they're slimmer, they move more air, they have better specs, and you know, it also looks great. You can see that it pretty much looks factory, so I'm very happy with this little mod, and it's going to work perfectly. The fans have a high-low switch. You can also turn off the LEDs on these hot swap bays, which is great, you know, if you don't want lights flashing on the front panel of your build. And you can see how they're powered and how the data is laid out. So there's 2 SATA power per bay, and obviously with the 3.5-inch hard drives, the 5 SATA data ports, so there's going to be a lot of custom cables to do in this build. It's going to be an incredible amount of custom cables when it's done. So you can see the hot swap hard drive bay at the bottom is the only one that really needed to be modified, but obviously I wanted them all to match, and I could have actually turned that bay at the bottom upside down, but again, from the front, you know, they wouldn't have matched. So it only just fit. I had to slide the radiator forward, and it is literally touching the back of the radiator, but it's good because there's still a good 15mm gap for airflow. So it's worked out very nicely. So as you can see, I decided to skip ahead a little bit for this one, even though this was an incredible loop to build, quite challenging, a lot of fun. I have shown loop building and tube bending for the past few builds, and I was starting to get a few complaints about it. So I will certainly cover it again in a future build. But for now, well, I actually did have some new things to talk about, because this is going to surprise a lot of you, but it's the first time I've actually used PETG. And that is because I'm the sort of person where if I find something, I start using something that is excellent and I see no evidence that there is anything better that is going to improve my builds further, well, I'm not going to change. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so since I started using acrylic for the first time, I've stuck by it, even though I've had so many people talking about PETG, that it's possibly better. But I looked into it, the chemical resistance is lower, the UV resistance, there's a lot of things about it that are not as good as acrylic. Acrylic is kind of a superior material, it's a harder, more durable plastic, but PETG is a lot easier to bend. So it's going to be great for beginners and newcomers. It is literally twice as easy to bend. It takes half the amount of time to heat it before it bends. It's a breeze to use, and I actually built this loop a lot quicker than I normally would because of how quick and easy it is to bend. But I'm kind of on the fence about whether I'm going to go back and keep using acrylic or if I'm going to use this. I'm not entirely sure on this one, but I'm pretty sure that acrylic also has a higher clarity, or possibly just a different clarity. But to me, the PETG looks like it doesn't have the clarity of acrylic, and because it's so soft, it scratches so easily. Just from handling it, it scratches. So as you're installing it, by the time it's in, there's scratches all over it, which a lot of people aren't even going to notice, but I certainly do. The thing is, because it's soft, it is easier to polish. But you can see this little video that I made to show how much quicker PETG actually heats and bends. And this was just a quick video that I made and put up on my Facebook page. We're also putting up these quick videos on Patreon. We've started doing this recently. We're trying to do daily update videos, kind of 60 seconds long, just something small. So yeah, check out the Facebook page, or for patrons, you can already check it out on Patreon. Mayhem's Coolant is a true enthusiast product. I've been using it for, I don't even know how long, but years and years, and I've never had any problems with it at all. I know some people have reported discoloration problems, and I don't know, I have heard a few other things about it, but I have never experienced any of that, and I think it's safe to say that I've built more water-cooled systems than the average person. So I'm not saying use it, but I'm just saying I love it. It really makes my builds what they are. It's one of the components of my builds that without it, last time I used something else, I had incredible problems. And I have had problems with a lot of the other products out there. But just the range and the freedom with Mayhem's as well, being able to create any color that you want, the pastel. And not many people actually realize this, but the pastel coolant is not just about the aesthetics. It's cool that it's opaque and everything, but it's actually a nanofluid as well. And the purpose of a nanofluid is to create higher thermal conductivity. And I have actually found Mayhem's pastel coolant to have better performance than normal coolant. So the nanofluid does actually work. It does do something. Only a couple of degrees. It was almost margin of error, but I've tested it about 4 or 5 times now in different builds, and it's definitely noticeable every time. So I'm filling the first loop, and for this loop I'm using Mayhem's X1 clear coolant, but I'm going to add Mayhem's clear UV blue dye to it. So it's going to be a UV reactive loop. And so I'm going to be using, obviously, UV lighting, but I'm also going to combine the UV lighting with some white lighting, because in the other loop, I'm using Mayhem's black pastel coolant. And I remember the early black coolants, some of them weren't fully black. And, that's fine because they weren't even called black anyway. They were called, oil black. I'm not sure what the other color was, but now Mayhem's has definitely perfected black. It is so jet black. It's such a beautiful coolant. And, you know, being pastel as well and fully opaque, it is just such a dark black. But I think it's an interesting combination and very subtle and understated, which is really what this build is all about. It has so much of a powerful presence already on its own. We don't need to show off here with bright colors. So just something kind of a little bland and basic, but it's really going to suit this build. And then a little bit of flair with the UV reactive coolant, but I want that to be as subtle as possible. So the first loop actually took about 2 liters, which is quite a lot. And you might have noticed there was a bit of backflow there, which was expected because there is so much volume above the reservoir in the 2 radiators, the 560 millimeter and the 420 millimeter radiator at the top. And you really have to watch out for backflow because it can catch you by surprise and overflow the reservoir. So it's not something that happens a lot anymore because loop design and the components are so much more refined now than they were back in the old days. And something that certainly stops it is the tubes, the Bits Power aqua pipes that I have at the inlets at the top of the reservoirs. So it brings the coolant coming back into the reservoir below the level of the coolant in the res, and that stops backflow. It also stops air from going back into the loop. It stops noise. They're a very important addition and a very important component. So it's now time to add the EVGA SLI bridge, and this is one of the new RGB SLI bridges. Beautiful part. And this is one of the final components. Then we just have to add the rest of the custom cables, do the cable management, and of course the lighting. There's an incredible amount of custom wiring to do in this build and cable management. I'm not even sure how I'm going to pull off some of it because it is some, very complex wiring. So the custom cables have changed a few times in this build. Initially, it was just going to be black, and then the client decided to change it and add some gray. And this is MDPC-X sleeve, so we've used a combination of black and platinum gray. Also MDPC-X heat shrink. I could not do these cables using any other product. And that's probably for me one of the best things about MDPC-X is its versatility. The sleeve can stretch to, I don't know how much, it's at least twice its size. So it means you can push it over connectors and just use it for anything. And the versatility allows me to do things like these SATA cables, which, when I first looked at them, I thought they were going to be impossible, but they've actually turned out quite nicely. The custom cables for this build were incredibly time consuming and actually quite challenging. Even just the cable management was challenging enough. I don't think I've ever done this many custom cables for a build. I'm going to cover everything that I've done here and take a good look around the finished product in the final part of the build log, as well as cover the test results as always. Thanks for watching, and remember that none of this would be possible without our patrons.